You fought for our freedom, and now we'll fight for your quality of life. We thank you for your service. You've made enough sacrifices. We won't let your hearing be another. We are Audiology Associates.
We never forget our fallen. I'm Bill Reynolds. I'm Director of Veterans Affairs. I write stories of our local veterans. I interview them, collect their photographs.
I knew that my efforts here were never in vain.
And now we're shifting gears to do a video series so that you can meet these veterans up close and personal.
Some shrapnel came into my lower left leg. It fractured my fibula in 7 places.
Please join me in honoring these great Americans.
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
I served in the United States Marine Corps from 1967 through 1973. My dad was a former Marine. He actually was in World War II in the Marine Corps.
Jim was into theater and the arts, much to the chagrin of his father.
He said, "You're kind of a disappointment. You're not into sports. You're not any of that stuff." Got a scholarship to a famous acting school. Graduated from the school, and then I started to get my draft notices. I said to the recruiter, I said, "What are you going to do for me?" And they said, "Well, we're just going to kick your butt and make a man out of you."
Jim decided to enlist to prove to his father that he was a man.
Well, in boot camp, they give you a whole bunch of tests, and I got lucky enough to be qualified in electronics. Running around in Vietnam with a rifle in my hand, it was not something that I was looking forward to. So I went to electronics school, and they sent me out to San Diego. First time I ever saw California. Beautiful blue skies, it was great. You know, surf babes, it was terrific.
The glitz and glamour didn't last long. Jim was quickly ordered to Vietnam.
I arrived in country in November of 1968. I was originally assigned to go to Da Nang, and wound up in a counter-mortar anti-personnel systems group. And our job was to find the people who were sending mortars and rockets into our bases, set up our radar systems, and eventually got promoted to sergeant, so I was in charge of a small team of Marines. Once in a while we'd detect a mortar or a rocket, and we call up the artillery, or we call the Air Force, and they drop bombs on them, or we call the naval gunfire from the Navy ships offshore, and they would shoot at the bad guys. We were kind of remote. I mean, we weren't in the cities. We weren't in Da Nang proper. We were out in the boondocks.
By the end of 1969, Jim's unit was doing very well. He felt the war was winding down. Things were looking up.
We had basically won the war, and it was kind of a holding pattern. We were not in any kind of huge combat situation. It was kind of a holding pattern, but things changed very suddenly toward the end of 1969.
Let us all understand that the question before us is not whether some Americans are for peace and some Americans are against peace. The question at issue is not whether Johnson's war becomes Nixon's war. The great question is, how can we win America's peace?
Well, in the latter part of 1969, President Nixon announced that we were pulling out, and that encouraged our enemies, the North Vietnamese, to attack us. I had a small radar team outside of Da Nang. One night we got overrun. The North Vietnamese sappers came in, they went through our barbed wire, they threw satchel charges around, and one of them happened to land in my tent, which blew me up, and my other sergeant on my team, he was severely injured.
Jim spent the night battling the enemy. It was terrifying and extremely dangerous.
I got wounded several times that one night, once by gunfire and another time by shrapnel wounds from a grenade. And I wound up having a grenade fight with a bunch of North Vietnamese, and that was no fun. That night was a very horrible night. We lost 14 Marines were killed, and over 40 were wounded. And they said that the body count for the North Vietnamese was over 60, 65. It was probably the worst casualties the Marine Corps suffered in all of 1969 and all of 1970 in one place. The place is called LZ Ross, not a place that I have fond memories of.
It was a place no Marine wants to remember, but Jim's unit stood strong and held on to courage.
They came in under a mortar barrage, and the first place they wanted to take out was our radar system, because the radars would detect where they were. Our tents were blown down, so I came out of my tent, looked around, and I was actually behind the lines. So we're actually taking fire from both the enemy and other Marines. So it was pretty hairy. And I prayed for the sun to come up, and it did.
Jim thought that was the end. His unit was submerged in darkness, literally and mentally.
I was pretty sure that that might be my last couple of days or minutes on Earth. And when you're convinced, or you're pretty sure that you could possibly die, it's a pretty scary thing. But a peace comes across you if you believe in God, and you believe in your training, and you believe in the men that you're with. The fear goes away, and you're not really fighting for the American pie and the flag. You're fighting for the guys next to you. I had a very close encounter with 3 enemy soldiers that night, and they didn't make it and I did. And the feeling the next day was not, it's horrible, I had to kill another person. It was actually, I was very happy that I was able to take these guys out, because they're trying to kill me. Every January 6th, I think about those guys and the fact that I didn't know them and they didn't know me. And if I was in a bar somewhere, I could have bought them a drink and we could have been friends.
Jim earned several awards and honors for his service and bravery on the battlefield. Jim eventually returned to America, but there was no welcoming, no ceremonies. It just felt wrong.
I got out of the Marine Corps in 1973. I was in a naval hospital in Yokosuka, Japan. Got out and was discharged in San Diego in 1973. Unfortunately, when I came home in 1970 from my second tour in Vietnam, we were told, don't wear a uniform because you will be spit upon, you will be looked at badly, and you'd be called a baby's killer and a bunch of other things. So I kind of slunk home. I put all my uniforms in my sea bag and put on civilian clothes. It was not a very friendly environment for veterans at the time. I would never tell anybody I was a veteran, and I wouldn't share any experiences with anybody. Would I trade it? Would I want to do it again? No. But do I regret being in the military? Absolutely not. I learned a lot about myself. And in the military, you know this, you meet some of the greatest people you've ever met in your life, and some of the biggest, for use a different term, jerks you can ever meet in your life.
Though he's out of the service, Sergeant Jim Hackett will always and affectionately be known as Private Hackett.
The thing my father always told me, he says, never get noticed by the drill instructor. So you had to keep a really low profile. So we'd learn to sleep on our feet because they were running us all day long. So I'm there half asleep, standing there sleeping, and all of a sudden I hear, you people, the drill instructor screaming top of his lungs, you people can't hack it. And all I heard was Hackett. And in the Marine Corps, when you hear your name, you gotta go, Sir, Private Hackett. That got me noticed by the drill instructor. Even though I made it to sergeant, I've always been known as Private Hackett to all my Marine buddies.
You kept us safe. You fought for our freedom. Now it's our turn. We want you to hear us when we say, thank you for your service. We are Audiology Associates.